I am Azoria, your narrator. Welcome back to another episode of Soblar, Concealed Revelations, Volume 1. In the last episode, we streamed just a little bit more into the evolution of the romance between Clarence and Helena. Their blooming relationship is now undeniable, but it is yet to be tested by the obstacles which will decide its fate. In this case, will Clarence be able to reconcile his obligations with Jeff, and the impending meeting with the drug lord, with his affair with the young beauty, who is slowly but certainly conquering his heart and mind? Also, the young teen, Lytha. She made her introduction into the equation. But who is she? What are those mysterious powers she possesses? And what role will she play in the development of the strange saga which is slowly beginning to brew in this place? And how will the others, who may be like her, be affected by hers? And Eterto's conflict. What is this secret objective being organized by the heads of the Royal Lotus? And what influence are they looking to achieve in the reshaping of the Asian countries they each represent? And what roles would Ayako and Ryuk be destined to assume in it? The answers will all begin to line up, one by one, as we continue through our journey into the Soblar universe. And now, let us begin with Episode 6, and the stunning conclusion of Chapter 3, Ill Advice. Let us begin. Vaughn was looking at the screen of his device. It was the information Burton had been receiving from Lennon. Vaughn had access to it as well, through an isolated link between their devices. Due to the nature of what they were investigating at that moment, Clarence's eyes seemed to be focused on what Vaughn was doing, but not his gaze. When Vaughn looked at him for a quick second, it appeared as if Clarence's gaze was lost. He was staring into nothingness. "Clarence, just give me a second, and we will get back on track," Vaughn said. Clarence nodded slightly, without much of an interaction. His head then tilted towards the right. As his eyes looked down, there was something on his mind, which got interrupted by something he appeared to have seen in the room. He looked over at Vaughn, as if looking to confirm his awareness, or something else. But Vaughn was still busy with his device. "All right, Clarence." Vaughn pressed a few buttons on the device, before giving Clarence the okay to continue from where they had paused. "Are you ready?" Clarence asked him. "Let's do it," Vaughn replied. "This would have been our third official meeting with Mickey." Clarence began. "As usual, we were in a taxi. This time, traveling east, towards a town near the other side of the capital. Helena had called the room earlier and I told her about my commitment for the day. We decided to schedule something for 2 days after." "Did you tell her where you were going?" Vaughn asked. "No," Clarence replied. "I didn't think it was necessary." He continued. "So, after more than an hour of travel, Jeff and I arrived near the area Mickey had instructed Jeff to meet him. I believe it was near a town called Los Yoses, not far from Moine, which was to the north, and from the looks of it, I wasn't sure we were going to blend them too well into the background." Vaughn seemed curious. "Why did you think that?" he asked. "It was a regular neighborhood, lower working class, but not disorganized looking. As we got into its border, I saw preparations for building construction around. Nevertheless, most of the streets were unpaved. Some houses had layers of plastic tarp covering up the holes on their rooftops. Weird-looking guys squatting next to random trees, talking way too loudly, drinking and doing drugs practically out in the open. It was the hood, but in a South American country, and Jeff and we were just tourists. And it was very clear to us, from the moment we stepped out of the taxi, we were supposed to wait for a guy named Manuel, who was going to bring us to where we would have another meeting with Mickey. Manuel was supposed to be waiting for us at a grocery store named El Seco, the Sack. We would meet him there and then we would have walked towards where Mickey would have been. We got out of the taxi about 3 blocks away from where the store was. The taxi driver did not want to drive any further into the area. He even asked us if we were sure we were going to the right place. He did so twice. Jeff ended up showing him the paper where he had written down the address. Clarence looked down momentarily. Vaughn did not take his eyes away from him. Then I paid the driver. Told him to keep the change. He looked at the money before stuffing it in his pocket. He then made the sign of the cross over his face and over us, before speeding away. Jeff and I stared at the car for a few seconds. Very odd, I thought. We then went ahead and walked the rest of the way. It was Sunday. In the middle of the afternoon, we saw people walking out and about. They looked at us as if asking themselves about what were we doing around there. Jeff smiled and told me we stuck out like two coconut trees in the middle of a cornfield. I agreed. As we continued walking, and getting closer to where the store was, I could hear salsa music playing. It was getting louder and louder. We were now about a block away from the place. I could hear the music sounding even louder now. All of a sudden, I see three guys walking very close behind us. I signaled Jeff with a hand gesture, but he assured me that it was going to be okay, not to pay attention to them. And so we kept walking. The store is just ahead, he said to me. I looked back again, and those guys were still walking behind us, looking at us in a funny way that made me very uncomfortable, like they were about to do something. They were practically at our heels. At that moment I couldn't take it any longer. I stopped abruptly, and quickly spun around and asked them if they needed anything from us. I did not get any answers in the form of a word, but a knife fast pointed at my face. I didn't wait to see anything else and just reacted. Jeff turned around when he heard my voice. I already had the guy with the knife in the chokehold, and the other two were about to attack me. I pushed the one I was holding towards them. One of them tripped against his own foot and fell. Jeff ran towards me and threw a punch at the other one. That one had also pulled out a knife, which Jeff was able to dodge to avoid cutting his arm. Everything happened really fast. The one I dropped to the ground stood up and the other one as well. Now, all three of them had their knives out, and they were coming at us with fury. Vaughn was now as engaged as Clarence was, as the story took an unexpected turn. He thought he was beginning to see a side of Clarence he didn't realize existed. Clarence's memory seemed to have regained its freshness. His voice was now fluidly conveying his thoughts with ease, and he was letting everything out, while adding a lot of details. Vaughn tried to contain how excited he was to see that Clarence now remembered what he went through with more clarity. And then, once again, as Clarence spoke, and Vaughn recorded, the story took a life of its own. Clarence's eyes were now closed, as the story continued. Then, in the blink of an eye, just as Jeff had dropped his book bag to defend himself, they all heard a loud gunshot burst through their ears. Elsewhere, in another continent. It was past 3 a.m. Monday morning. A skinny frame man, in his early 20s, walked out of a small restaurant, at a still busy, and very popular location in the Itaewon district in Seoul, South Korea. The man ate the remaining noodles from a plastic bowl, and after dropping it into a garbage container outside the restaurant, he brought out a pack of cigarettes from his pants pocket. There were two black luxury sedans parked on the corner, a Mercedes-Benz in the front, and a BMW behind it. The BMW in the rear was from where another Korean man was shouting at the one who was about to bring the cigarette up to his lips. He was wearing a black suit and a white shirt, smiled and nearly disregarded the shouting, as he proceeded to light up the cigarette already hanging from his lips. He signaled and shouted back to wait, to those waiting for him in the car, while adjusting his suit and looking around. He then walked up to the car and asked the man waving his hand at him, what was the problem? Well, yeah, you lost again, the man inside the car said to the one standing outside. You owe me 300 now. My team won by 2 scores. Again. I didn't bet on the amount of scores this time. Yehua shouted at the one inside the car. The cigarette almost flew out of his mouth as he did. There were 5 others in the car, all joining in the argument about the bet. There were 3 more in the backseat of the Mercedes, but they seemed sleepy. They stayed inside the car and didn't bother getting involved in the argument. Inside the restaurant, the workers were washing and drying plates, brooming and mopping the floors, and setting up the chairs above tables, as they were getting ready to close the place for the night. But inside a back room, where no one else had access to, 3 heavy-set Korean men, in their early 50s, were having a very low-tone conversation with Sao Lee, the 30-year-old South Korean assassin who had been entrusted by Royal Lotus to eliminate the target known as Niema. Jian-song, one of the heavy-set men, sat behind a desk. As the other two stood near the door, Sao Lee was seated on a chair, next to a poker table. "This is everything you need to know about the job," Jian-song said to Sao Lee, while handing a manila folder to Byung-woo, the one closest to him. The folder contained the information Sao Lee needed to conduct his mission. Song was the older-looking of the three and wore a distinctive gold chain with a hammer pendant. "You will have to." Song was about to say something. "No need to, Jian-song," Sao Lee said, interrupting him before he spoke to him about the details within the information he had just been given. "I just need to know where he's gonna be. That's it," Sao Lee said to Jian-song. The others watched and listened as their young assassin spoke. "Niema is an overrated former associate. I've already heard a lot about him. I'm not impressed by what they told me." Sao Lee paused to pull out a cigarette from his jacket pocket. He sounded very confident. The old-timers liked what they saw in him, and also the way he operated, ruthlessly and with hunger for more power. "Sao Lee, you know this will be a very good opportunity for you," Jian-song said. "Yes indeed, Sao Lee. This is your chance to move closer to the top of the nest," Byung-woo added. "I am at the top of the nest," Sao Lee barked, while standing up. The old-timers calmly looked at each other, but remained in silence as Sao Lee exited the room. "Stupid kitchen dwellers. This is why you were never given any respect. Stay in back of the kitchen, like roaches. This is where you deserve to remain. It is where you all belong," Sao Lee said, taking one last look back. As he walked away, seeing the serious-looking face of Jian-song staring at him through the crack of the door, as it closed behind him. Outside of the place, the men were still arguing about the sport bet. Sao Lee exited through the back of the restaurant, and silently walked towards them. Yehua saw him and immediately alerted the others. "The boss is coming back," he said. They all became silent as Sao Lee walked towards the Bimar, with a very serious face. The other three exited the bench to hear what their boss had to say. Yehua walked up to him. "Boss, tell us. What happened?" he asked Sao Lee. Sao Lee stared at him, and then at the rest of his men in both the bench and the Bimar. He had his hands behind his back as he observed each and everyone, before displaying a brief smile. "I'm moving up in the nest," he said to his men, while showing them the manila envelope with the job order. His men looked at each other and began jumping from happiness. They all knew that if Sao Lee's rank within the syndicate grew, their salaries and reputations would grow as well. Yehua was very excited as well, but an underlayer of concern was hidden under his display of happiness. He did not wait for Sao Lee to tell him to open the front passenger door of the bench for him. He already had it open even before Sao Lee looked at him. Sao Lee then ordered everyone back in the cars as he got in the Benz. Yehua ran towards the driver's side, asking Sao Lee where to go before turning the engine on. Sao Lee stared at the envelope momentarily, displaying a brief smile. "Take me to her place," he said. Yehua knew exactly where he wanted to go and turned the corner without concern with the red traffic light at the intersection. Back in Costa Rica, the sound of a gunshot in the middle of an altercation between Clarence, Jeff, and three strangers left things frozen. There was someone holding a revolver in their left hand. Clarence got down on one knee while taking cover. He was looking around to see where the shot had come from. Jeff placed his hands above his head while ducking down. "What the hell is this?" One of the three guys dropped his knife to the ground. As they looked back, they heard the man who had fired his gun from inside the car. The car had pulled up a few feet from everyone, and four men quickly got out. The man holding the gun walked up to Clarence and the others. He looked over at the man who had attacked Clarence. "Tino, do you mind telling me what the hell you are doing with these gringos?" The man holding the gun shouted at the one next to Clarence, speaking Spanish in a slang style. Jeff noticed how quickly he took control of the situation, and he determined that he was certainly someone important. A connected criminal or a trigger man? His looks. A nearly shaven head. Chisel physique. Tank top. Tattoos all over. Jeans and boots. It all pointed at someone he did not want to have to mess with. It was nothing. Adriano. They started it. We were walking to El Seco, and this gringo acted like he wanted something, and I was about to give it to him. Tino said to the man with the gun, who turned his face to look at Clarence and then at Jeff. Jeff looked down, trying not to make too much eye contact with him, but the man had forgotten about the other three guys, and his malicious stare had been left to only focus on the two foreigners. "What are you looking at, gringo?" Adriano said to Clarence, who did not take his eyes away from him. "I don't like it when people I don't know look at me. Since I don't know them, I don't have nothing else but to think about the possibilities," he said to Clarence. "What possibilities?" Clarence asked. Adriano slowly lifted his gun. While looking at it, he kept it above his waistline, and pointing towards Clarence. He then lifted his face slowly. "A few of them," Adriano replied, staring at Clarence in the eyes. "1. You could be an enemy, or someone hired by an enemy, and you are making sure that I am who you are supposed to kill today. The other possibility is that you could be a Marika, and you are looking at someone who you know is going to give you what you want and break you into pieces." Clarence looked down, displaying a brief smile. He then lifted his face and stared back at Adriano. "I guess you are in luck today," Clarence said to him. "I am neither. Therefore, why don't me and my friend continue in our direction? We have an important meeting to attend, and it is essential that we are not late to it." Clarence and Adriano stared at each other. Neither man blinked. Jeff was able to see the tension fast brewing between them, and he decided to put out a few words to put an end to the momentary standoff. "Hey, Senior Adriano. All this was just a misunderstanding. We are not from this country, but we were invited here by a man named Mickey. We are journalists, and Mickey asked us to meet him at El Seco for a meeting." Clarence could see that Adriano knew who Jeff was talking about. His facial expression and his body language changed. Not the look of anger, but maybe his willingness to make the two men feel very unwelcome there. The other three goons looked at each other. The one who had attacked Clarence lowered his head and apologized to Adriano. At that moment, the car that had been following Jeff and Clarence pulled up next to Adriano's car. He looked back at the driver of the car talking to his driver. He also saw a woman staring at him, and at everyone else, with a smile. She was seated behind the driver. "What is Denor doing with them?" Adriano asked himself. The other car then drove away, and almost instantly, Adriano's driver got out of the car and walked up to him, and whispered something into Adriano's ear. As he listened, he never took his eyes away from Jeff and Clarence. His driver walked back to the car. Adriano looked at Tino and the other two guys with him. "Get out of here. You're not going to El Seco today. And if you ever see these two gringos again, look the other way. Do all of you understand me?" Jeff and Clarence stared at Adriano as he gave the other guys orders. They saw the fear he inspired in them, and could not prevent themselves from thinking how dangerous he must have been. Adriano then looked at Jeff and Clarence one last time, and without saying any other words he ordered his associates back in the car. Before he did as well, the driver then quickly drove away. The other three guys didn't even look at Jeff and Clarence as they walked the other way, in total silence. "Did you see the looks on those guys?" as Adriano was talking to them. Jeff made the comment to Clarence. Clarence did not immediately answer, as he picked up Jeff's book bag from the floor. "And why did you keep staring at him? Are you hunting for a conflict or something?" Jeff added. "That guy seemed more unstable than the ones we were handling. Would not want to have to deal with him again." Clarence replied. "And I kept my eyes on him because he had a gun pointed at us. Jeff, I needed to make sure that if he decided to use it against any one of us, I was able to have enough time to react." Jeff was not expecting the answer he heard from Clarence. He stared at him momentarily, thinking about what he had said. "Let's just get going. We are already late," Jeff added. He and Clarence got back on their track. They turned the corner and there was the store. El Seco. "Shit. Clarence, would you take a look at this?" It was the grocery store indeed. The name was written in bold letters over a big white sign above the 4 doors of the location. Tienda El Seco. But for Clarence's and Jeff's surprise, what they thought would be a mini market, or a simple spot where the locals got their milk, sugar, rice, the things people would normally purchase. It was something closer to a daytime nightclub establishment, where people danced all over the sidewalk and even spilled out into the street. The sound of dance music was being played from 3 giant speakers, positioned on each corner of the store. Meanwhile, everyone was heavily drinking beer and rum. This place was no grocery store. It was a slice of paradise on the corner, for tough guys to hang out, set up illegal timber crime deals, pick up attractive and ready for anything type of women, and to show off their skillful dance moves. This took place on the entire afternoon hours on Sundays. Jeff looked around with one thought in his mind. This is what I call the real deal. It took Jeff and Clarence a few seconds to absorb the scene. Neither of them had an idea of where to begin, or how to even make their way into the store. The place was packed beyond capacity, and where people were not dancing in dramatic fashion, competing against each other to see who had the best and baddest moves. They were drinking and shouting about God knows what. Their Spanish was spoken way too fast and too broken for Jeff or Clarence to understand what anyone was saying. Then, Mis hermanos, ¿cómo están ustedes? 2 men walked behind them and addressed them in an unusually friendly manner. One of them identified himself as Manuel. Jeff let out a sigh of relief as he heard the name. Manuel told him and Clarence to follow him inside the store. Jeff looked at the crowd, wondering how they were going to make it inside. But there was nothing to it. 2 guys walked ahead of them and Manuel, and everyone opened the way for them as they saw who they were. This is what I'm talking about, Jeff thought, as he and Clarence, following Manuel's footsteps, made their way behind the counter. The bar was being served by 2 very sexy-looking women with their hair all done and wearing short tight dresses. A man in his 50s was sitting on a stool with his legs crossed while smoking a cigar. He was wearing a white short-sleeved shirt, black pants, shiny black shoes and dark sunglasses. Manuel shook his hand as they went past and through a door at the back of the store, where the party was really happening. Wow, so this is how it really goes down, Jeff thought out loud, as he entered into El Salón de la Retaguardia, the rear guard salon, as it was written at the top of the door. A very large room, which did not even appear to be part of the grocery store location. The room was filled with cigar smoke everywhere, party balloons and whistles. Half-nude women carried buckets of ice with beer and champagne bottles in them. The same type of music playing outside was being heard in there. Club lights flashing from the ceiling. And even though the salon was dark, Jeff could tell who all of the powerful men in the place were. They were all wearing expensive jewelry, designer sunglasses, clothing and shoes. This is it, Clarence, Jeff said to Clarence's ear. I think Montero's here, and we are going to do the interview today. Yeah, Clarence. Jeff could not contain his emotions. Clarence was just trying to figure out what was about to happen. Manuel then grabbed Jeff by the hand to help him walk through the crowd faster. Clarence followed them as fast as he could. They made it all the way to the back end of the salon, where Mickey was seated drinking champagne and celebrating, surrounded by several beautiful women and a few of his men. Clarence saw him, but his attention was not totally on him, but on the 3 men guarding a door almost next to the table where Mickey was seated. Jeff, come here. Sit here. Mickey was very drunk and in a very celebratory mood, and he wanted everyone around him to feel the same. Clarence was given a glass of champagne by Manuel. He did not want to drink, but Manuel insisted. He then took hold of one of the women serving everyone and ordered her to dance with Clarence. The woman was carrying a bucket with melted ice and empty bottles, and she quickly placed it on the floor to follow Manuel's orders. Jeff watched as Clarence attempted to get out of that situation unsuccessfully, as Manuel went ahead and ordered the woman to teach him how to dance salsa. If he did not know how to, he would soon have to learn. Mickey continued laughing with hysteria. He had his left arm around Jeff's back. He was also acting completely out of character. Jeff had never seen him so deliriously happy. He asked Mickey what was the cause for all this celebration. Mickey looked at him and told him that Montero had accepted to do the interview in a couple of days. And he also moved me up the ranks. Mickey added with a huge grin. Jeff now also had a reason to celebrate. And he reached out for a bottle of beer from one of the buckets on the table in front of him. Clarence looked his way. Jeff lifted the beer up in a toast. Clarence knew this was a very good sign. And with all the doubts and fears aside, he put more emphasis on following the moves that his dance partner was trying to teach him. Drink all you can and party hard, Mickey told Jeff. When you leave here later, you and your associate must lock yourselves in the hotel. There will be no going out until you receive my call. You will go nowhere until that time. When you get that call, it will be to come and meet Montero. El Pesado. The heavy duty. Okay? You will not see me again until our roads cross each other in the future. Do you understand me? Mickey stared at Jeff right in the eyes. Do you? Mickey asked Jeff again. Yeah, Mickey. I understand. Jeff replied, just before he and Mickey shared a toast with the other people around them. Clarence took a moment to look at Jeff. And also, the place. The people in it. For everyone in there, it seemed as if the chaos of the world in which they all lived in was lost and left outside of the walls of the salon. In here, there was no money troubles, no health problems, no social or political issues. There was just them, enjoying life, as if they were not at all concerned about what the next day would bring for them. Maybe, because they already knew what it could be. The next day. It was evening time, in the province of Hangzhou, at the southern end of the Grand Canal, in China. Wu Shenshen was seated on a comfortable stool, contemplating the fish peacefully swimming inside the calm waters of a man-made pond in the back of his old architectural, Sichuan-style estate. Two little girls ran in his direction, playfully laughing as they got close to him. Alam, Kai Hong, come near me. Wu Shenshen called upon them. They played together and stumbled, one trying to outdo the other as they ran towards him. Yay, Grandpa, they shouted. Wu Shenshen was thankful to see his granddaughters so full of happiness. He loved them dearly. He opened his arms as wide as he could, as the two girls tried to tackle him down as they hugged him. He almost fell to the wooden floor beneath his feet, laughing heartily. Yay, we want to have ice cream with you, Al-Lam said. She was 6 years old, a year older than Kai Hong, who also wanted to have ice cream with Grandpa. I want ice cream too, Wu Shenshen replied in a loud voice to his granddaughters, looking at them dearly, before embracing them again. But as he did, he was also trying to hide the sadness in his eyes. He got on his feet, and the girls rushing to have their ice cream, they ran back to the inside of the house, which was discreetly surrounded by armed security personnel. Both in the outside and the inside of the estate. Later on that same night, Wu Shenshen, with his eldest daughter Mingmai by his side, they put Alam and Kai Hong in bed. Their bedroom was lavish and nicely decorated in both modern Chinese style and Disney characters as well. Wu Shenshen stared as the girls were sound asleep. Little Alam had dried ice cream on the left side of her lips. He smiled and looked at Mingmai. She looked down to the floor and did not make eye contact with him. She does not want him to see her tears, and yet, he does. He embraces his daughter, knowing exactly what she is thinking. I love you so much, you cannot even imagine, he said to her. Father. She is about to speak. But, don't say anything now, he tells her. Everything will be okay soon. Don't worry about anything. The solution will come soon to us. Several hours later, Wu Shenshen's security personnel could be seen smoking outside several parked sedans, posted at the back of a private hospital for children. Inside, Wu Shenshen is seated on a chair by the bedside of Kaifeng, his 13-year-old granddaughter, who suffers from a rare disease, which was causing her organs to fail. Outside the hospital, two of his men are talking about her, while standing next to a car at the rear emergency entrance. Do you think she will last much longer? One of them asks. So far, doctors had exhausted all avenues of conventional medicine to try and extend her life. The other one replied. They both look down to the ground before he continues with his answer. The organ transplants she had received were incompatible and unsuccessful. He added, "Besides, it's like she needs an entire new body. How can anyone make that happen? Even if you have all the money in the world." Inside the room, Wu Shenshen held Kaifan's fragile little hand while he read a story from one of her favorite books, something which he did as often as he could. He read for as long as he could, until he could no longer keep his eyes open. The next day, 3 old box trucks, with worn-out beige tarp canvases covering the back, were carefully making their way through a narrow and muddy road. They were heading towards a small village in Bangladesh, miles away from the capital, Dhaka. The morning was foggy, but it was cooler than usual, since it had rained the night before. The truck moving at the front of the convoy seemed to be having some problems with the wet soil, but the driver was skillfully maneuvering around the edges of the ground to prevent the vehicle from getting stuck for a second time. "Are we closer, sir?" Firash, the driver of the last truck, asked the person sitting to his right, in between himself and another passenger. 3 people can easily sit at the front of each truck, and Firash was comfortable enough to drive with his elbows wide open. He was from Afghanistan and had some family members who were settled in Yugoslavia. As the passenger next to him was remembering before he replied to his question, "Not much longer now," the person in the middle responded, in a passive manner. The driver took a moment observing his appearance. Pale skin, dark blue eyes and curly brown hair. He also took notice of the hooded coat he was wearing, which seemed too big for his size. Right ahead, the driver could now see a glimpse of the entrance of the village, and at that moment, the man seated by the passenger door received a hand signal from one of the riders in the truck ahead of them. He then told Firash to slow down. The truck at the center moved all the way ahead in the front, and pulled up only a few feet away from a frail-looking wooden fence, held together to a pole by a simple green twine. Firash looked ahead, and could see a small group of people. The first were some children who pushed open the fence and were emerging from within the village grounds. He could not make out what they had in their hands, but for the person seated next to the door, it appeared they were carrying flowers with them, amongst other things. Some of the children seemed curious to know who they were bringing the gifts for, while others brought handmade baskets of fruits. A few of the elders held items in their hands as well, which they brought as additional gifts to share with the other people in the trucks. Shagotam, Janai Gori, who was one of the revered elders of the village, spoke in her native Bangla, while she walked towards a person who, with the help of several others, had just gotten off the back of the truck. He was seated on a very old-looking wheelchair that creaked as it rolled. He looked very frail and helpless. After appropriately adjusting himself in his chair, he spoke to Gori in the same language. "Shagotam, my dear Dolly," the person said to Gori, addressing her by a personal nickname. Gori calmly stared at the person. He was dressed in a wool hooded coat that concealed every sign of his identity from head to toe. Gori held her hands together and bowed, greeting him with happiness. She was a petite lady in her early 70s, with long white hair tied back into a neat bun. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. As the person behind slowly pushed the wheelchair closer to her, the frail person seated in it opened his arms to embrace her. After a short but very meaningful hug, Gori took over from the large man pushing the wheelchair and brought it away from everyone. As they became busy with the rest of the guests, Gori and the person in the wheelchair moved near a thick ancient tree, where they carried a much-needed private conversation. "Once again, Dolly. Once again," the person said. They embraced each other again, and Gori stared at the face of the person with love in her eyes. The hood of the wool coat covered his head, her back was turned away from the others, and the tree shrouded them both. No one saw what their eyes conveyed to each other, nor hear what they spoke about. Soon after, they both calmly emerged back from behind the tree and headed towards where the others waited. When they caught a closer sight of their special guest, the curious children suddenly became very playful and happy. They ran, and all gathered around him, but his arms were not big enough to hug and embrace all of them, all at once. "I was under the assumption this was our first time in this particular village," Firash asked the person next to him. "Is this your initial visit overall?" The man asked the driver in return. "This is my first time." Firash went on to tell him that he had just been recruited from an economically ravaged area in Afghanistan. and he volunteered to be part of the truck services. "Well, what about your family?" the other man asked him. "I was not doing anything for them where I was. I couldn't. The person who approached me offered to take my family to a safe place and set them up for a better life. What about you? Do you have a family?" Farash then asked. The man by his side remained silent, his gaze towards the road ahead, and the thought on his mind of the day he was helping Farash family to move from where they had been. "Let's head out," the man seated by the door said to him both. After noticing the long pause by the man talking to Farash, and after seeing that the other people were dismounting from the other two trucks, "I believe it is the first time for many of us coming here to this village, but he has been here many other times before," the man seated at next to Farash said, as they climbed out of the truck. "What is your name?" Farash asked him. The man looked down to the ground for a few seconds. Then he lifted his gaze and looked at the person on the wheelchair. Before speaking, "You can call me Omar," he said to Farash. At that moment, the guest of honor asked Gori to wait. She paused from pushing the wheelchair and waited. Omar again looked in their direction. Seeing this very slowly, the person in the wheelchair began to stand up and away from it. He turned his head and appeared to have looked in Omar's direction before he began to walk into the village accompanied by the other elders who have come to greet him. They all have words for him, but their guest was almost always surrounded by all the children. The rest of the men who had traveled with him proceeded to unload big wooden boxes from the back of the trucks. The boxes were as large as small automobiles, and the men began organizing themselves to bring them into the village, with some help from the villagers, who also offered donkeys and oxes to help transport them. Soon those same people cut through the woods, so as not to be seen by anyone else. Once they were out of the village's boundaries, they walked through a field of tall weeds, transporting the same wooden boxes, away from any other borders. After walking a few miles, they eventually entered a cave, which led to a hidden underground bunker-like tunnel. Sometime after, the guest of honor sat on the ground at the center of the village council, with Gori seated by his right side. They spoke about several different topics of importance to them, and the guest addressed all their worries with straightforward answers and proposed some resolutions as well. Gori spoke about a subject which others in the village were very troubled by. She said they expressed growing concern with the continuation of illegal logging and development, spreading from the cities into the neighboring territories. Gori had discreetly spoken with some of the other village leaders from several villages to their east, and they have told her about the threats they had received to prevent anyone from even attempting to interfere with their work. They said they were also offered monetary compensation to cooperate and to convince others to abandon their lands. Those in charge are calling this progress, Gori said, in a solemn tone of voice. "Teacher, what is there for us to do if this situation grows till the steps of our very borders?" one of the elders asked. "As you had once advised us," the same person continued, "we have kept ourselves almost out of touch with everyone else. It will be beyond our ability to continue to live here safely if those making their advance arrive too close to our borders." The teacher pondered in silence for a moment and took a slow glimpse around the simple and dimly illuminated room where they had gathered. It was just the walls, carpets made from jute, a woven dried plant from the region, as well as different handmade cushions on the floor. A small fire at the center of the room burned to keep the tea kettle warm. They each held teacups made from clay, and just their pleasant company was all that was needed at that moment. For the time being, it will not be something that will reach your homes, uproot you and change how you all live, the teacher said to the village elders. They all listened quietly as he continued speaking. "At least, for now, that is," he continued, while silently observing each and every one of those in the room with him. He waited a while before allowing the rest of his words to reach their ears, and their minds as well. At the same time, the teacher continued speaking. "That which seems to be unwelcoming news to the roots of your way of life may just be a test, a trial of fortitude perhaps, for the foundation of the old ways you have strongly preserved for all these years. You have acquired what few have thought of, even those from adjacent regions have yet to understand with their eyes what you can see from them, not being revealed in you. This will not, in other words, affect your method of farming, but the seeds of your future. And they must be planted much deeper than what your own roots have. This must be stressed to the deepest of your cores. Your future seeds will be tested at their own time, for the world in which they will grow is slowly becoming cloudier. That precious illumination, which gives an impulse for the preservation and proliferation of what the farm's birth, at a certain time, will no longer be enough. There will be a phase within the frame of an oh-so-distant segment of your story, in which the root of your strength will be put to task by the hands of your seeds. The teacher spoke, the village elders listened. For Gauri, it was understandable in the way he presented them with a summary for the future. Ominous and unclear. She understood his ways. After all, she had been his brightest disciple. As for the others, the foundation of fear and insecurity still lingered in their minds. They were not ready. He knew this, but at that moment he was not yet sure if it was the correct moment to tell them. Later that night, Gauri accompanied the teacher on a walk away from the village's borders. They spoke of other times, while observing the stars in the clear night sky. Gauri asked if any aspects of the setting within the village council needed to be addressed. She wanted to hear from him, his true perception of those in it. The teacher laughed briefly, just before asking Gauri to stop pushing the wheelchair at a particular spot. What do you believe needs to be reshaped, within the setting of the very council you helped to install? The teacher asked, while Gauri sat down on the grass, and gazed up at the stars. She felt the grass beneath the palms of her hands. Before closing her eyes, I have known them, and trusted them from their early mental age, Gauri said. Still, one's own sense of trust does not always fit a true indication of what lays deep within the labyrinth of anyone's soul. Gauri spoke, as the teacher listened. For the true notion of change over anyone's mental age and stage remains a mystery, which is, at last, dictated by the very impact life circumstances and assimilation of experiences that takes shapes within each of us. As it goes, some may learn faster than others. Some may find the ways sooner than many. Gauri then became silent, allowing herself to submerge inside a thought. Can you hold me, as you once did? The teacher made a request, which Gauri was happy to oblige. She got on her feet and sat near the teacher, on the arm of the wheelchair, and embraced him, just as a mother would, to her own child. The Helios within this astral have taught us so much, the teacher commented, staring at the stars before slowly allowing his head down. We have learned many of the ways from them, and yet, the true vastness of the knowledge they attempt to offer us, we have yet to even begin to grasp. For still, our age is young, still rebellious, at times impatient, nevertheless hungry, in need, eager to be guided. And this, my beloved, brings one of the true attributes of trust. For no matter the mental age of anyone, or their inner soul, trust will be always acquired by who plants it and nurtures it into flourishing. This, you have achieved. Gauri listened to the words of her most admired person with tears in her eyes. It was clear to her that she had indeed earned the respect of her beloved teacher. But what was not, was how far into the future she would have the honor to show him she merited it. Then, Gauri saw the teacher handing her something wrapped inside an old cloth. What is this? She asked with concern. It is an image I would like for you to keep in your thoughts, he said. I need for you to keep this person present in your mind. Gauri stared at the picture, before reassuring the teacher that she would do as he had asked. He did not have to say much more, for she above all was his most developed disciple, and he knew very well that she was aware of the ominous reason for his visit. She looked at him. His gaze was peacefully set on the stars above, as she took one last look at the image. In the picture she had been given, a picture of Clarence Douglas. The next day, it had just gotten dark, and within the forest near the outskirts of Zaire, now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo.
What is taking so long? I was told that they have been dropped at the regular point. Who is that coming over there? Armag. Move. Wait a minute. You. Stop there. Who are you? What do you want here?
Hey, I am Herman. Are you Lieutenant Lo?
Stay where you are. I know that name. But I was told there was two of you. Where's the woman?
She is coming with me.
Where is she?
She needed to use the bathroom. It will be only a minute.
Amo, go and check. Okay, I will. And you, give me the password.
It always seems impossible until it is done.
Why didn't you say it sooner, my friend?
You didn't ask.
Come closer. Now you are welcome with me.
Sure.
Lutando, I found the woman.
Hi. Sorry I took so long.
Come with me now.
Okay. No problem.
Claire, are you okay?
Yes. This gentleman told me that they are the people we were supposed to meet here.
Very well. But enough talking, everyone. Get the car from the hideaway. Let's take our clients to their destination and get our payment. Very well. You two can follow me. We will meet Amo at the other side.
Okay then. Let's go with them. But keep your eyes open. Understood.
Sure. I understand.
A day later. It was close to 8:45 p.m. in Costa Rica, and against Jeff's pleading and advice, Clarence was making his way out of the hotel. He was holding a plastic bag with 2 cold beverages in it. As he crossed the street and was about to turn the corner, he looked back at the hotel room he was supposed to be sharing with Jeff. The lights were on and he could see Jeff's shadow over a curtain. He was talking on the phone. Clarence smiled, and then began to walk away. Less than 2 blocks from there, Helena was waiting for him inside a taxi. She got out of the car when she saw him. They hugged and kissed passionately, to the point that Clarence almost dropped the bag he was carrying. They laughed out loud before getting in the car together. The driver drove away with them still laughing, passing right by someone who had been watching Clarence from across the sidewalk. It was Denora, the same woman who had seen him around the corner from El Seco during his altercation with Adriano. She had a look of surprise on her face, which slowly turned into a big smile. A car then pulled up in front of her. There were 2 men who had arrived to pick her up. She got in it while still smiling. "Okay, Denora. You look happier than when I dropped you off earlier," the front seat passenger asked Denora. She opened up a backpack that she had been carrying. She took out a clear plastic bag with well-arranged large stacks of cash, and she handed it over to him. "Nothing," Denora replied to the man. "I just think I'm going to have a very good season, starting just this night." And we have now reached the conclusion of episode 6, chapter 3, Ill Advice. I hope you enjoyed it. Please join us for our next episode, and the beginning of chapter 4, Nearsighted Means. Until then,